1, 2, 3, 4.
What time is it?
1, 2, 1, 2. You are listening to Online Time Fame Podcast. I'm your host, JD. Today's show is called Charleston White. Go for your own throne. Go for your own throne. We say go for your own throne because Charleston White began as a community activist, did what he did for the community, didn't benefit from it financially for himself, and when he started to create his online character that we still know as Charleston White, he just went to the top, began a comedy career. And when we say Charleston White, we're really talking about, it could be called symbolism, it could be called a metaphor, and just a way to describe the journey of how digital media works. We're talking about digital media and when we say Charleston White, because when under pressure, his answers are better than most of the people we see who are entertainers, athletes. You know, we see now even in the digital realm. The digital realm, meaning social media platforms, it was always associated with free speech, with less strict regulations, because the Federal Communication Commission does not regulate the digital platforms the way it does the traditional platforms of television and radio. So at least online, especially earlier, 15 years ago, even 12, 10 years ago, you could say a lot of stuff online that nobody said nothing about. Now they're reining in what can be said, and some restrictions do happen. Some violations, some overstepping of so-called agencies did tell social media platforms what not to allow to be said, which they have been reprimanded and spoken to at the highest levels. So, you know, you can say more than a lot of places. So when Charleston White did say certain things that offended certain people, like his comments about Charlie Kirk, he does a lot of statements and sayings for sensationalized value to get attention. People, it's entertainment, so he entertains. But sometimes that entertainment can be taken the wrong way. So when he was pressed, he was intelligent enough to say something that was so real that no one wanted to talk about what he said. The country doesn't see. This is the thing when we say, oh man, these Caucasians, man, they just racist. It's, you know, we know what systems are and what the past has shown. But there's also another thing. So-called black people, when we talk about American descendants of slavery, because everybody ain't black. You know, it's an umbrella that people like to get under for the benefits that they can get when they come to this country. So they, you know, they sound like us, they look like us, they perform like us, so they must be us. That's how the U.S. works. If any group you go to, if you conduct yourself like that group that you're around and you look close enough to that group, you can say, well, no, I'm not actually Asian, but my grandmother was Asian, and you may you look a total different way. It's just it's something that people can exercise and try. When you have mixed population, so many different groups, all in one place, especially when you go to major cities. So the point is, when Charleston White, when they pressed him about comments he made about Charlie Kirk, he jumped out and said, look, white people, America, black people ain't your problem. China's your problem. Russia's your problem. To say a statement like that and address it as America, that's something that can't be done in any other countries the way it can be done here. So when people criticize free speech, there are restrictions here. There are things. But those restrictions don't usually lead to execution. There can be arguments for times when that happened. But Charleston White was able to say what he had to say, and he went further to a place that no so-called black leader in this USA would ever say. They're too shook, scared to death, scared to look. They would never say, wait a minute, America, because Charleston White did say, hold on. The United Nations has designated a specific place for so-called American descendants of slavery to speak. And they could step to the United Nations and confront some of the actions of the USA in the UN, and the world is waiting for that to happen. Ain't no so-called leader, pundit, whatever these individuals like to call themselves, as they're collecting funds from the inner city people on their behalf when they're supposed to be teaching. They ain't never said that. It's known. It's been done on multiple occasions. People know about it. If one knows logic and they look at, why would one go to the same people who is their so-called oppressor for justice? That's not a new concept. But the point is, Charleston White reiterated it. He repeated it. He reminded everyone of it when he was put under pressure for what he said about Charlie Kirk. Because Charlie Kirk was upheld and sanctioned and thanked and addressed and held in high regard as though he were a high-ranking so-called government official, like a prominent status-holding individual. That's how he was viewed. Yet he made comments that were negative. But in the U.S., there's a lot of theater. People play game. If you say this, we'll pay you. It's a tradition of deflection. So the point is, the so-called people that we look to, while they're saying what the USA did in the past, and they repeat that, they have nothing else, no other talking point, but they won't take the actions necessary if they were to solve the problem. That's how you know who's not about it. They don't know it, or if they do know it, they won't do it. So when Charleston White was put under pressure as a comic, as a social commentator, a political commentator, he said, wait a minute. If black folk wanted some real help, they would go internationally. Now, which of these individuals that's supposed to be conscious emphasizes that? It's a known fact. Malcolm X said it in the 60s. It was already implemented in the 40s. And then again by the NAACP. Who talks about that? So Charleston White was intelligent enough to say, hold on. Black people, they waiting for y'all to say something. But because individuals are self-serving and they get the amount of economics they want, they ain't got no smoke. See, they talk a big game to the everyday common working man because it's theater. So-called black folk and a lot of people around the USA, they like to hear a good speech. Black folk been raised to like a good sermon. They like a good podcaster. They like a good conversationalist. But no action's got to be taken. Not much has to be done. It's just like a high, like a drug. They get that hype. Yeah, man, he was dropping jewels. Man, knowledge. And then what? Your stomach's growling again. You're back eating that same meal that you can afford. While those individuals who rally and function as so-called community leaders, and they only have one stick to swing, always talking about the USA is the worst place in the world, when actually it's the best. Socially, it's the best. It's always putting down the U.S. But these individuals who are talking have luxury vehicles, large homes, and some don't, but many do. So that's called race politics. They make their funds off race politics. They ain't going to do nothing. And it may be to the point sometime they get hired to keep everybody in line. And that's no fault of their own, because a sucker's born every minute. That's what they used to say. So if someone wanted real change, they would do what? Go for your own throne. Go for yours, because they ain't going to help you. These individuals talking, at the end of their talk, they got something to sell. Ain't even told you how to make it on your own. They can't, because they have to feed off the people at the bottom in order to be at the top. I ain't talking about Caucasians. I'm talking about the people who look just like you, whatever group you're from. But because it's the USA and it's not based on a monarchy, they don't have a king system. One can rise to high levels based upon their hard work. Maybe not where they're supposed to be, but in a place better than any other place in the world. So that's the key. And that's the problem. So with Charleston White, by him elevating, demonstrating that he's now cross-country doing actual comedy shows, instead of just being a social commentator online, being restricted, having his accounts banned and taken, he showed improved by being intelligent enough to navigate and move around and make economics, have his own website, telling people, get you a website, put some products on there, where other individuals who speak online, they speak high and mighty, but they don't have no other business except what they get from the Google AdSense revenue. That's all they got. So while they want to back and forth and talk about him, it ain't about only talking about each other. Get yours. Make something happen for your family. Quit just always having something negative to say. So we don't want to have to say people's name, because it's 3 things we always say. Small minds talk about people. Average minds talk about events. Great minds talk about ideas, and I added their implementation to solutions that make our lives better. That's what it's all about. What else would it be about? So when people go and talk about, man, this country for 400 years, that's a talking point that has some merit, but it's past merit. It's deeper history than those little bullet points that one can learn on a street corner. People have not done extensive research to know the complete history of how the USA actually works. It don't come from a free speech. Put some work in. Go to the library. Not online, do deeper research before you think you know what you think you know. So that's why when Charleston said, wait a minute, at the UN, they've already designated the mistreatment of so-called American descendants of slavery. He even acknowledged that. And await you to say something. You don't hear none of the so-called leaders for the past 60 years, so-called black leaders. When have they reminded people of that? They haven't. Why would one have to wait for them to say it when it's right in the writing of history, but people don't read? They don't read nothing. So my point is, Charleston White said that to remind Caucasians when he was put under pressure. Hold on, man. You know, you're one speech away from being embarrassed, because that's what it does. It embarrasses the U.S. when the Negro wakes up and he thinks bigger than the localized domestic point of view he has when he says, man, I only got McDonald's to eat every day. In another country, they're living off like 1/10 of what you're living off of. Their standard of living is much lower, and it's getting terrible day by day in the U.S. in comparison to what it was before. Around the world, the U.S. has way more overall. The systems, the structures. Why you think people fighting and scrape and just run as fast as they can to live in the USA? Because it's the best. So the funny thing is, why we said Charleston White's theme to go for your own throne, it's a funny thing going on where Dave Chappelle, the comedian, a few years ago, when the LGBT community had the whole country under pressure because no one could criticize LGBT people without them calling them homophobic. Just like other groups have a name that you can't criticize them, or they'll call you a name quick. But you can say the N-word anytime you want and say, oh, no, I didn't say it with the E-R. I said it with the A-R. Like, Nick, that's my man. That's just, we just say that like we're homies. Think about that. And they got everybody convinced. But the point is, Dave Chappelle broke the internet when he had the Netflix special from maybe 2003. I can't remember the name of it. And what he did was he made everyone see, I can say what I want to say because it's still racism. But my point is, he brilliantly wrote a monologue, and he put together an act where he was able to talk about homosexuals and show their own flaws and hypocrisies. The next special after that he did, maybe 2024, he just ran with it, continued, and couldn't be stopped. The first special, there were threats to boycott and strike at the Netflix headquarters if they didn't stop his comedy special from coming on. And that was coming from the LBGT community. So the point is, there's biases in every group, especially in the U.S. How can you tell some black folks they're racist? See, that's people who don't read. Because racism is an institutional structure that comes from power. That power is supported by economics and political action. And so-called black folks don't have none of that. They look like it. That's a nice jacket you got, nice car, nice watch. But the actual income that so-called black folk have is less than 3% of the national wealth, which has only been discovered recently by people that know. So the point is, it's available to know. But the point is, that ain't the thing. So when Dave Chappelle opened the door, he other comedians said at the time, a few years ago, within the last 2 years, Dave Chappelle, he freed us, meaning comics who could now speak on whatever they wanted, because people couldn't criticize LGBTQ members. I mean, the dude could have a full-on beard, a wig on and a dress, and he could say, "I feel like a woman." That's completely illogical. You can't change chromosomes no matter how many surgeries one has. Can't change DNA. There's male and female DNA. That's it. Chromosomes, excuse me. I'm not a scientist, but chromosomes would only be male and female, and it can't be altered. What they were in the beginning is what they will be. So, the point is, Dave Chappelle had another event. Dubai, Arab Emirates, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, music festival. Before that, there was a problem. Dubai, according to Associated Press, a prominent Saudi journalist who was arrested in 2018 and convicted of terrorism and treason charges has been executed. And this was dated June 15th, 2025. The Kingdom said this is what occurred. Activist groups maintain that the charges against him were trumped up. Turki al-Jazeera, who was in his late 40s, was put to death on Saturday, according to the official Saudi press agency, after the death penalty was upheld by the nation's, meaning Saudi Arabia, the nation's top court. Authorities had raided al-Jazeera's home in 2018, arresting him and seizing his computer and phones. It was not clear where his trial took place or how long it lasted. According to the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists, Saudi authorities maintain that Al-Jazeera, Jasser, was behind a social media account on X, formerly Twitter, that levied corruption allegations against Saudi royals. Al-Jazeera was also said to have posted several controversial tweets about militants and militant groups. So, this is June of this year. This execution happened where no one was familiar with the court proceedings. It was private. And that's not the situation for what happened in October of 2018 when Jamal Khashoggi, a U.S.-based journalist and critic of Saudi Arabia's government, walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, where he was murdered. As a prominent Saudi journalist, he covered major stories, including the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the rise of the late al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden for various Saudi news organizations. For decades, the 59-year-old was close to the Saudi royal family and also served as an advisor to the government, but he fell out of favor and went into self-imposed exile in the U.S. in 2017. From there, he wrote monthly columns to the Washington Post in which he criticized the policies of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the son of King Salman and Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler. So, in his first column for the Post in September 2017, Khashoggi said he feared being arrested in an apparent crackdown on dissent overseen by the prince. So the point is, this Saudi music festival that occurred in October of 2025 is seen as a propaganda tool to make those events, and the fact that there's censorship which can lead to execution without due process. The comedy festival was to change the image of Saudi Arabia. So who was called? Some of the biggest names in comedy. Dave Chappelle was there. Kevin Hart, Chris Tucker, Bill Burr, So it was a big event, and the Riyadh Comedy Festival, and a lot of comedians criticized Dave for taking that. Like, you didn't need that money based upon the human rights abuses that are conducted by Saudi Arabia. But I say all I have to say is this is just a lesson in price and people being able to be paid enough to just focus on what they're getting. And that's the way that the U.S. operates, contrary to what people think. A lot of times people have to look out for their own self-interest. When Charleston White said he was doing community work, helping others, he couldn't even do anything for his own family. And until he really focused on, well, I got the benefit, I'll say what I want to say. And once it started benefiting him to be brash and outlandish and critical of the way that the so-called inner cities work, and the mores and the mores, and the morals as well, and the way people operate in the inner city, their values, just gonna say it like that. He started to become popular because he didn't just take the values of what were given, because those values kept the status quo as it was, just like on the larger scale, looking at the country. So with that festival, some so-called African Americans spoke out, and it was strange, because when you're talking about comedy, it always takes us back to Malcolm X. When Malcolm X did a speech in 1963 at University of California, Berkeley, and he was some questions were asked from some entertainers about what they thought, and it was a Newsweek survey, a poll. And then some questions were asked about maybe Elijah Muhammad, maybe the Nation of Islam. It was somewhere in that realm, and just world views and some national topics. And Malcolm X, he didn't like what they said, and he told them, he said,
these are puppets and clowns and have been made celebrities.
So he was talking about the so-called entertainers that were asked. So he said, we're the only group where entertainers are asked their opinions. So that's why with this Riyadh festival, it could be looked at like, well, these are just comedians, man. And, if they want to go get paid, go get paid. Sometimes the funds makes a difference in one's life. And no one has to explain why they work at a certain job. And, that's an argument. No one's going to do anything for you, but people are telling you shouldn't do that. That's a sellout move. It's an argument. It can be seen both ways. So the thing is this: certain economics were mentioned of how much people made. That's just the amount that was announced that they made, because the amounts that people are being quoted as making, it was anywhere from 200,000 on up to 1.5 million for like one performance or something like that. We don't know what the real numbers were. We don't know if that's actual. Because to move certain people, it could have been astronomical economics that no one could ever imagine. No one really knows unless one knows their accountant. But the point is, there's a lot of events happening in Saudi Arabia that they get to put together certain fights and certain events because they have the oil economics that they're trying to change their country to be like a popular destination of tourism. So they are doing these festivals, and just the executions that occurred there, the murders that came at the hands of their so-called government, that's not really even an issue like it is them wanting to expand. Some people say it's for the propaganda to clean up their image. Of course, that could be the case. But also it's to make the country a destination and a respectable place, of what one once thought Saudi Arabia was, which was desert. But the funny part is, just sitting back and watching, we don't know. These are people in communication. Bill Burr is under pressure right now. He's under fire because he was seen as someone who didn't fold for just money. We're not talking about a regular stand-up comic who makes $60,000 a year. We have millionaire comics who can turn down anything. They didn't. So it's more comedy to watch them explain and justify why they spoke at that festival, why they were there. Bill Burr, he was funny because he said, yeah, you start out with what you can't say and gradually move to something more positive. But yet people criticize the USA for a lot of what happened in the past. But as we've moved forward, there have been a lot of firsts and progressive moves and actions that have taken place over a period of the time of American descendants of slavery being here. So if anyone could say that, they could. But to throw it, this is what happened. Let me just be specific. The other comedian, his name is Ari Spears. Ari Spears said, quote, "When did America become the moral compass on human decency and human rights? Did we forget 400 years of slavery, the greatest crime against humanity? 400 years of murder, rape, mayhem, torture, abuse? Did we forget the genocide of the Native American people? Their land was stolen, and historically, the U.S. lies about who discovered America? America has just as much blood on its hands as any other nation, country, or continent." Unquote, but I did switch a few words around. Seeing what he said, but in gist of what he said, that's like 99%. So I said quote, but maybe I read something different, and then maybe I didn't write down something else he said exact. But it was like, no, I didn't change the context of what was said. And that last part, now, if you want to say, hey, I need more economics because I've never done a comedy show where I could go and buy a new vehicle, you can do what you want. If that's what you did it for, hey, I need a new car. I want to pay off my house. Had a little rough point. Yeah, that could be that. That would be his business. But when one tries to reach back and use the history of the USA for something that's only going to benefit him, that's a little over the top as far as, and Ari Spears is very intelligent. But to bring up 400 years of punishment, slavery, torture, mayhem, abuse, to justify doing a comedy show where one made, let's say he made $1 million or 10 million. The 400 years you just mentioned, trillions of dollars were generated in good ways and bad. But everything that ever happened in the U.S. made it the country it is today. The pain. So it's a different bond, and it's not to say it's all perfect, but you can't compare a country that just executed somebody allegedly 6 months ago, and it wasn't even a trial that everyone knew. Like, my point is, I'm not even in that. It's nothing to be spoken on. But I'm saying to say, the way that the people are justifying it, you can see that they're not highly intelligent, and they're not astute, and they're not versed in logic, arguments, just this conjecture. They're just talking with a few points, and we have these. This is the sad thing. We have these points you can say 400 years, and it's deeper than that. It's more detailed and complex and more nuances to the country than just saying one thing happened. And yes, it was something major, but you're using that for your own benefit in your own pocket. You ain't saying, you're speaking on 400 years of an institution, but no one's benefiting from that funds you just got. So you were able to use that which happened to people, your forefathers. Yes, but it benefited you, and you only said it when it confronted you. So you didn't say it just to say it because it was an everyday occurrence that you're stressed. He don't live in the projects. He don't live in a place where people who work hard every day, and they don't say that every day. They go along and they're happy to have what they have, and they wish for better. But this is an individual who's been in the entertainment business for 30 years, made millions of dollars. That is the American dream. You made millions, but then you defend another 300,000 or whatever you made, and you say it as though this great travesty of America is to say they have just as much blood on their hands as any other nation. That's arguable. because you weren't in every other nation. You don't know what every other nation does. And you're in the place that lets you become a millionaire when other places you can't be a millionaire, period. You can't be a millionaire like that in other countries the way you can here. So you were brought there as a celebrity, as a figurehead to send a message, not just because it was propaganda, but because that's what celebrities do. Even in the States, you're just a token figurehead of the problems that occur for the everyday working man in the USA. There's people who work every day at low-paying jobs struggling. You don't speak for them every day. You don't speak for them once a week. You do what you do, and you tell people to listen to your podcast so you can get more attention and get more bookings. See, as people speak out out of convenience. You'll see a celebrity and they'll say, hey, I couldn't get in the Gucci store. And they'll go to the press and say that. But all the times when they were balling out and drinking champagne, they don't say nothing. They don't come outside with the bottle and say, hey, I was drinking champagne, so let me bring 5 people on the street to come get something to eat. Let me stop in this restaurant. Or it's not to say it, to simplify it in that way. But people complain when something goes wrong with them. Now it's racism. But when they're balling out of control and doing well, they don't have no complaint for the general state of the inequities in the USA. It's opportunistic. There was an entertainer that was in a restaurant one time. Excuse me, no. They were in a store. And they went and told the press that when they were in this store, Louis Vuitton or one of those type stores, they didn't get the complimentary bottled water. They give complimentary Perrier or some type of water. I didn't get my complimentary water. That's racism. Like, come on, man. We can't even afford to go in those stores, period. And the one time you want to talk about racism is when you don't get your bottled water. It was hilarious. You don't have to go to a comedy club to laugh. That's my point. These dudes are comedians. These dudes they're funny every day. So their argument, and top comedians are arguing about going to Riyadh, to this comedy festival in Saudi Arabia, and the rumor of what used to could happen to you, let's say it like that, were enough to not even want to go there. See, it's a whole different, no disrespect to Saudi Arabia, but that's not an argument one like them can defend. Let it be what it is. To use what the U.S. doesn't let you do, and the atrocities of the U.S. while you're riding around in your luxury vehicle that you've bought from the free economy of having comedy clubs all over the USA and able to have a living and criticize any political figure in existence. You can criticize Trump, anybody, without even thinking about it. Where these other countries, not just one, 90% of these countries, you can't criticize that country's so-called government. 90% of over 160 countries. Let's even say 180. It's around 180 countries in the world. You can't criticize them like you can do it here. Yeah, it's not free and clear in the U.S. either. But to say of the genocide that occurred, that's out of convenience while you're being attacked. So I go back to say when Charleston White told people, when Charleston White said, America, we're not your problem. But it wasn't just that. That was him speaking to those who were wanting to persecute him. He was saying, I ain't your problem. Russia's your problem. China's your problem. They're buying up all your land, buying up stuff, positioning themselves within your country for a takeover from the inside out. Got you following them around. You ain't got to follow me. I ain't doing nothing. This is my place of this is my country that we did more to build than anyone else. Anyone. Based on the rates that we made, which was little, always making the least. But that ain't the issue, because we can make it right now. We can still make moves. There's still openings to stand tall. Too many benefits to mention. So don't go and do a comedy show and then come back and try to mention atrocities of America. That was disrespect. When you came back, they could have said, you can't come back in here. Or they could have said, when you leave next time, don't come back. You ain't that free as you think you are, because your mind ain't free. These dudes ain't as intellectual as they appear to be. That's out of convenience that people criticize. So when Charleston White said, wait a minute, America, there's an open seat at the United Nations waiting for so-called American descendants of slavery, the institution, not to speak, to say, I have a problem. They waiting to embrace. That's why Charleston White don't say that much. Because if so-called black folk were serious, they would stand up. They'll stand in a circle and say, what should we do? Because you know what? When you go make that move, guess what's going to happen? It could end badly. It could end badly. Every leader you have knows how it could end. Because freedom ain't free. So if you got something to say, you got a criticism, figure it out. But if you're going to stand tall, you don't see no tall standing individuals in this country that are men amongst men as so-called black people. They'll punch you and tell you how they going to beat you up and who they sprayed on when they was driving by in some car and something ghetto as hell and low scale. They'll talk about that. But they couldn't have an intellectual conversation. See, people like to blame the USA about being a terrible place. They have problems, plenty of them, but the main problem ain't what Caucasians do. The main problem is so-called black folk who claim to speak for you, to represent you, to love you, and they're the first ones to turn on you. That's the key to the whole country right there. It ain't that European. It's that individual who ain't gonna let you get to him to say, hey, let me see if I can make a deal. No, it's already a Negro who's been designated to block you off from that. He'll say handle it. He may not say necessarily block him. He'll decide to block you. Oh, no, I want to be in this position for the rest of my life. So I ain't going to bring up nobody else. I ain't going to develop nobody else. I ain't going to say, hey, I got somebody with a better idea than we've ever heard. So-called black folk are the best at that, of holding their own selves back. Their own people hold their own people back continuously. We won't call it crabs in a barrel. It's called haters. They're haters. Ain't no crabs, ain't no barrel. They're just haters, negative, and they're unproductive individuals. It's called they're opportunists. Once they get the opportunity, they capitalize on every other opportunity out of greed. And then when it goes wrong, they use the same catchphrases they always use. 400 years of slavery, the greatest crime of humanity. They use that as a crutch, as a talking point to trigger other people's emotions to not see what they're really doing, the selfishness that they have inside themselves. What they don't even have the ability to do to feed people intellectually, because that's not what they do. They're not that. You know what they are.
These are puppets and clowns and have been made celebrities.
These individuals, as Malcolm X spoke in 1963 at UC Berkeley, these are entertainers, man. Quit putting so much faith in entertainers. Go read a book. Entertain yourself. And we do have moments when they're useful, but at this point in time, the so-called entertainer is speaking more than the people who have sense. We listen to entertainers like they're actually someone who should be looked upon for knowledge and wisdom, and they're just someone who makes us laugh. You know what they're called. So the point is, but the sad part, sometimes the entertainer is the one who takes the most risk, because that's what the court jester is able to do. He's able to tell jokes. But when we start seeing entertainers designating who is the voice of truth, that's when we saw Charleston White. He ain't that. He came from being a community activist. He said, I can jump in and make more money being funny and being a jokester than I can with seriousness, because so-called black folk don't like seriousness. They ain't ready. But every chance they get, they blame the so-called white man for holding them down. And the main source that holds themselves down that they can't prove. They can't prove I stepped to this individual and they wouldn't even talk to me. They ain't got no proof of stepping to somebody important and striving to make a move. Not just saying it, but putting together a project plan. They don't have it. Not asking for something, but being something, doing something, living something. They ain't known for that for the past 60 years. And was talking before then too. But what we're saying is people use the talking point of something wrong when they ain't did nothing right.
This was the leaders. And this included comedians, comics, trumpet players, baseball players. Show me in the white community where a comedian is a white leader. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns and have been made celebrities and usually say exactly what they know that the man wants to hear.
So as we look back as far as just Malcolm X, and we don't like to say Malcolm X because Malcolm X has the connotation of being a just a militant. But at the same time, Malcolm X was a street dude, Detroit Red. So everybody likes that part, the game, the macking, you know what I mean, being fly, you know, and so that part they can relate to. But as far as the intellect of one who told the truth on the spot, other people, if you compare what they're saying today, is clown behavior. It's jokes and it's small level, small-mindedness. It ain't nothing deep and profound. As I said, they're not men amongst men. They're not a man amongst men. They can't go around the world and say, hold on, bro, what you mean I can't say whatever I want to say? If you want me here, and if you want to convince the world that you want to open up and be legitimate, what's happening with A, B, and C? Would you have still been invited? Could they have came out and said, yeah, well, I stepped to them and I said this because they asked me to do this. And I had it behind the scenes. I can't tell you what I said behind the scenes, but, you know, they agreed to let me do what I want. That would have made that country bigger than they could have ever imagined. That's what I'm saying? But you don't got nobody. But once them people get offered that certain amount of money, it's like the famous series, James Bond. When you watch James Bond, just don't go back and watch the latest James Bond movie. Make it your business to enjoy the series from the beginning, from Sean Connery all the way to every James Bond that there was. And if they try to, because at the time we're in now, they'd probably politicize it, which they have been working on doing, making it more political and what do they call it, DEI, make it more, what's that word they use? Politically friendly, just say it like that. Politically correct, excuse me. Make it that, and then that'll be not. Then you'll know that's not what it really was. When you watch the old one, you'll know, oh, they got to them too. It's politically correct now. You can't, say certain things no more. But the point is, James Bond was always known for saying the truth of what he was pursuing, and the villain would always say, Mr. Bond, what's your price? Every man has a price. That was the famous idea and from James Bond movies, because these comedians talking that stuff, they offered them a price they couldn't turn down. And all they had to say was, you know what? I wasn't going to tell them nothing. I just went out there and performed. They paid a price that I liked, and I took them funds, man. I apologize, everybody. I made millions in my career. And the paper they offered, I agreed to meet them halfway. I'm not a politician. I went to get paid. That would have ended that. It wouldn't be no criticism, especially for the so-called black folk, the so-called black comedians. They would have been like, they could have said, I ain't worked in a while. I know y'all ain't seen me. And if y'all show me some more love in the States, which I would think I deserve, or I thought I'm good. I mean, maybe I can get an administrative job in one of these television networks or something, or maybe I can get something. But I was a little out of pocket. My paper was short, and I needed economics, and I just did it. See, what's wrong with being honest? I just did what I had to do for my family. I apologized though. Maybe that could have, So the point is, that's the comedy of this country, because we've seen people going to fighting events, fights that couldn't take place. The fighters didn't want to do it. Saudi Arabia added more cash in the pot, and we saw fights happen quickly. They can make fights happen, because you could say, I'll never fight him, and they give a number. Well, maybe I could try and see if I could fight him. See, and that's what they do. But so is it being for sale, or is it being capitalizing on a business opportunity? That's for the individual to see, to decide. So if I know a place that people are coming up missing and they're not getting trials without the fair trials in court, yeah, the U.S. don't have fair trials, and people who got more economics get a better trial. But it ain't as bad as some of these other places. They don't get executed like some of these other countries. Let's just keep it 100. The U.S. ain't the villain that people wanted to make it. But my point is if anyone could talk, yes, it would be American descendants of slavery. But they didn't take that opportunity to say, wait a minute, man, before y'all criticize me, they didn't have their politics in order. They didn't go over there with the proper responses ready. Whatever they say is dumb. And Dave Chappelle, they may have shown one of his comments if that was a correct comment, there was a comment made that he has a safe word. And the safe word was, I like Israel. I love Israel. There's something floating online saying something like that. If I'm correct, I retract what I just said and apologize. But it seemed like that was what was said. And if it was nothing was supposed to be political, but one could criticize them all day long and get away with it because the Middle East has tension. The country itself couldn't be criticized. But you can speak the truth to people around the world if you have the heart and the mind to do it. That's not coming from a comedian to talk to some country. These countries don't want to hear nothing. People who don't have no economics or moral standards to say. So when Ari Spears went on tape and said, "Who is America?" When did America become the moral compass of human decency and human rights? That's very disrespectful because who is America? Is it the people who live here amongst the so-called Americans? Even if because is it the people who live in this country, or is he talking about Caucasians? Is he talking about people who look at the American way of life wherever they are around the world? Are you talking about the comedians who criticized him specifically? Who is he talking about? Don't just bring up when did America become the moral compass when they let you be a millionaire. They made a mechanism where they didn't throw you in the penitentiary when they felt like it because they could. It make it look like a trial. When's the last time you spoke up about the Innocent Project and Barry Scheck and about the thousands of brothers who are wrongfully convicted of crimes and who have done 30 and 40 years in the penitentiary? When has in this country and been released and found innocent because they didn't have the economics to have proper legal representation? And it even goes further than that. I'm going to stop right there because that's a talking point. I could go deeper, not for free. I ain't going to just say it because those who know. Study, read, educate yourself. That's the point, and that's what Charleston White demonstrated. He said, go for your own throne in his own way. He said that. Get yours. Make sure you got what you need to get. We can always work together, but don't put the talking point that you're putting the whole U.S. on the spot because you wanted to get a check for you. Don't do that. That's disingenuous in that way because you're not that smart to really know how the U.S. really operates. There's a surface way that the U.S. operates, and there's a different way that you would only know with proper education, and you wouldn't have said that. What you mean 400 years? That's a talking point. What happened here is greater than the 400 years you could even mention in a sentence. It's much worse if you look at the totality of what we don't even know. Sometimes we don't know, I could have did this. And that's what Charleston White said. When did you and your group go to the United Nations and say that? You said it laying in your bed in a hotel room after you just got paid for a show? In a place that the world sees as one of the highest violators of human rights on the planet? Or did you decide to wake up one day when you got pulled over by law enforcement and say, I'm going to take this to the United Nations? That ain't what you did. I'm going to make a statement in this country with a press conference that I got disrespected when I was at Goodyear getting my tires changed. That ain't what you did. You did something that benefited you. These people benefit them. And then when it's convenient, they throw the U.S. on top of it like everything is the U.S.'s fault. And they don't look at the benefits of what they get when they land here, when we live here, when we continue every day and can live. It ain't the greatest, but it definitely ain't the worst. So that's disrespectful to all of our people who ain't never had no complaint like that. Sitting up talking about 400 years. We got relatives we ain't never heard use that statement. We never knew what happened in this country to that degree and to a certain time because our families didn't complain all the time. They just worked hard and they said just keep going. And they didn't look at the bad. They said focus on the good. We learned what it was. Some learned earlier than others. But wasn't no hatred in our hearts. He ain't got no hate. But that's a great way to deflect from what you did. He was able to go to the dealership and buy whatever he wanted. He can call the realtor. He can pay more on his mortgage. Just say that's what you did and let that be what it is. But that's why we say we do not like to focus on people. Because if we only focused on those small ideas, the small-mindedness talks about people. Average minds talk about events. Riyadh Comedy Festival, the event. Great minds talk about ideas and solutions. Bill Burr was comedic in his response, and they've cooked him thoroughly, roasted him for what he said. Bill Burr was saying how when he did the show, oh man, there's a Starbucks, McDonald's, Burger King, wow. What's that mean? They take you in the back of that restaurant and chop you up into little pieces just like they do anywhere in their other buildings. I mean, theoretically, that didn't justify nothing if the claim is human rights abuses and executions that are unjustly performed. Come on, bro. They're laughing at Bill Burr because he's generally don't fold for nobody. And it's just comedic when a comedian falls off as far as being the free voice of a so-called nation. Them people are respected because they had enough paper to drop enough on the table to make him say what he's saying now. That's what makes it all funny. Forget about the executions. We don't know their internal politics. I don't know that. But we are able to speak on it here as we do. And no one's going to roll up in 20 minutes and do anything. So that's the greatness of the USA. But the point is, it was so funny when Bill Burr said, he said when speaking about how the progress that's being made in Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, he said, you start with what you can't say, and then you gradually move to something more positive. He never said that about the USA and the treatment of American descendants of slavery. You see, he never said, well, we can start where they are and move to something further because they should be further than where they are. That ain't his spiel. He's doing what he has to do for his family. And he says a lot, Bill Burr. But everybody's looking out for their own best interests. So whatever it is, man, all of that hating and putting people down as a nation is a joke. It's a joke, and it's not a joke meaning of judgment. It's a joke watching the fireworks of this happening. A lot of people's careers changed. There's singers and entertainers who perform for certain politicians, and they had their careers affected. And fortunately, the amounts that of economics, of so-called money that these people made was enough. It don't matter whatever happens from this point on. Like the announced amounts they made, it's not known if they got secret drops and other deposits and other funds and other ways of, getting paid that no one can trace, that they're sitting on good. But the point is that's the joke right there. They had enough paper to buy everybody off. That's funny. That's funny. Forget what they said. Forget what happened. Oh, they chop people up. Well, we don't really know the inner workings of why they did what they do. That happens around the world. Brutality is global. Now, there are some countries where they don't do certain things, but where isn't war the number one standard of behavior on this planet? Every inch of this planet is controlled by military force. It doesn't say which military it is. 3 bombs control the fate of the earth. That of the nuclear capabilities of the U.S., China, and Russia, and upcoming are others like India, and upcoming and striving to be that Iran, and whoever else is working on nuclear capabilities for weapons of mass destruction. That is the preeminent way in which peace is maintained, because without the force of violence and the threat of violence, peace cannot be maintained. So to put down and say this country is better than that one or this is this, they're doing what they're doing. And you're not even in the conversation as a man among men, because you are not internationally recognized as a voice of something that can be respected by scholars, top politicians, just the greatest minds of the world when it comes to philosophy. That's not you. You're a comedian, you tell jokes. Some comedians say wise things. But in this instance where you were able to be purchased for a small amount and laughed at by your peers because you didn't just say, hey man, and this is not one specific comedian that went. Chris Rock and them was going to say, man, my paper was messed up. You remember that time I had those tax problems? They squashed all that. We would say, damn, you should have managed better on rush hour 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. But God, but I hear you. You got to do what you got to do, right? That's all we would have said and laughed it off. As a comedian, we would have laughed. But these dudes tried to take themselves too seriously because, like, bro, you're an entertainer. And the world is messed up. They do what they do. Like, people here do what they do. Everybody does everything. They get down with what they get down with. And its violence is the language of the universal language of the earth. Violence. When we look into the wilderness and we look into nature, what do animals do? The larger eat the weak. So that's what it is. That's unfortunate. We want to be a perfect world. All stand together and sing "We Are the World" or "Kumbaya." That's an idealistic way to look at it. Idealistic. Yeah, cool. But the comedians, that's funnier them defending themselves than the jokes they tell. That's all I'm saying. So when Charleston White said about what happens at the United Nations and how it operates, none of these so-called smart people, leaders, so-called black, that was the marking point to show none of the so-called black folk that we uphold don't even know that. But they got all this stuff to talk about the pyramids in Africa and what people did in 1821 and all of these like trivial facts. But as far as their politics of the actions they make, they never made it. One would need a certain amount of economics to do certain things. Everybody who's talking, they've touched that amount. They ain't done nothing. They don't stand on theirs like that. Because once one gets a certain amount of economics, complacency sits in. Why would you go out and risk your life and your livelihood and what you've gained to stand tall? They ain't built like that. That was your past people. Those are others. There are those that do that. But it ain't these. So stop criticizing this country that's letting you eat because they know you ain't built like that. You just in it to get what's for you. You for your own, for your family first, and stop talking about what somebody did as a crime to humanity when you benefit every day of what was done, just like everybody else. Some suffer. You're not the sufferer. You're not the one working minimum wage. And as you say, when it's comparative to other places, it's still better. Sadly, our worst is better than what their worst is. That's the sad part. So that's why in context, yes, you can say that. But there's people who can only eat beans and rice every day. Only can eat rice. Whatever they may have, whatever shortfalls their countries and their economies have, that's what they got. This is the gold standard when you talk about the USA. So these individuals shouldn't have much to say if they're not bringing a solution to make something better, to improve for the nation. Quit worrying about what other people doing over and seas in their countries. That should be said for everyone, because all these people talking are doing better, and they ain't bringing 10 people in some kind of way to do better in this country. People ain't eating here, and they ain't got no solutions, just like the people they criticize don't have no solutions here. They're aiming at the top. They ain't doing this. Well, where's your proposal that you had written? You could probably call some of these very people on the phone. Bill Burr can call the White House when he gets ready. They'll answer the phone. Oh, Bill Burr, how, what's wrong? You can get to him. You can speak on your podcast. They'd answer you. But you ain't got no plan to change the whole land. These aren't these people. They just talking every day for their own interest. They don't have no master solutions, masterful ways of figuring out anything for the whole country to be better. They ain't got it. So we ain't arguing that. But the point is, Charleston White has to do what he has to do. Long range cross country. That's how he carried it. Went from the internet and digital media, and he started doing shows in physical locations. He started doing more interviews, comedy shows, and he has to speak to top level people to regulate what he does. He has to regulate, of course. But the reason why he has more justification in his regulation is because because of what happened to him. When he was starting out helping communities, these individuals with this economics ain't helping communities. It doesn't only take economics. My people started an organization, empowermentforthepeople.org, where they show people how to start a business for free, just on that website right there, empowermentforthepeople.com, showing them what to do. They don't gotta buy nothing. Read that, go study off what you learn, and go see if you can build yourself as your part-time project. Start you a business that you can start. I guarantee 90% of people could do it. Now, is it easy? Is it? No. Because you got to work on yourself. Get your physical health in order. Get in shape. And be the exemplary pillar of what people see physically. Are you healthy? Are you in shape? Is your mind fit? Are you self-educated? Be that. And then maybe you can do consulting from there and a branch of other things that you can go based upon your own individual characteristics. Are those dudes saying something like that every day? My people dropped that for free and didn't have no economics and opened the door based off Tupac Shakur doing something that none of these other entertainers strive to be. Some do, but that's not part of what they do. They got theirs, they doing their thing, and everybody else is doing worse day by day. And they doing better day by day. It is how they do it. It doesn't matter, because we have to pull ourselves forward the best we can. If we have the strength, if we have the endurance, we have to keep going. But them doing whatever they do is for them and their self-interest, and that's the funny part. So that's why it wasn't no thing. That's why I said for small-mindedness and talking about these individuals, that's a large market for people. And because we already said this a few times, that won't even be said no more. Go back and listen to when we first said it. That's all we'd remind someone of. Now it's here. We'd only be talking about something that might be mentioned briefly. The most attention comes from conflict and talking about people. But that's nothing, because they're already laughed at and counted as being nobody. They're already a nobody. Talking about somebody's small achievements, man, they ain't fed no multitudes. They ain't helped no young people with just a conversation. Go to school and go to college and say, well, I wouldn't got me a trade and learned how to fix refrigeration and heating. They ain't heard none of that from no entertainer on a regular basis. Man, here, you go do this. I know somebody could help you do that. Here, go call that number, and this would be free. That's not what they do. They focus on what they do. That's what it is. No problem. But don't get up in here and act like you're the voice that we should listen to with all the millions of followers they got. And the smart people have one or two. That's what's wrong. It ain't what's wrong overseas. It's what's wrong right here. So whatever other people or other groups and other nationalities are saying what's going on, that's them. But what was good about Saudi Arabia is they offer people enough funds where they forgot. Some people said, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. And that's how everybody saw the contract that was given and what couldn't be said. That's where the contract leaked out. But other than that, that paper made people's minds change. See, so if that's what it was, so what? Some of us we ain't even confronted with that. But to try and justify what happened, that's the comedy in itself. We can laugh at the whole event because it was supposed to be funny, right? Well, it was for everybody. The whole world got to laugh that these dudes are up in here stuttering, trying to defend, going and getting paid. Get paid. Do what you do. You've been doing that. You ain't been reaching out and helping nobody. You just been running your mouth as a comedian. That's what comedians do. What are we expecting? So what do we expect from a basketball player but basketball conversation? Soon as they go left and talk about something else, it's a downward departure from where we were. It's ignorance. These people ain't trained and qualified to talk about nothing. They prove it. One proves who they are by their actions. So that's why I said small-mindedness, people, average-mindedness, events, great-mindedness, ideas and the solutions to those ideas, the solutions to problems with those ideas. That's what it is. That's how it used to be. That's what the statement used to be. That's what it was. That's what was taught. Reading, self-education, not just watching videos. Study, improve, and that will never fail you. No matter how bad you're doing, if you do the best you can do and improve your mind, when your turn comes, you'll be ready. When Charleston White's time came, when he was able to make some economics, he had the mental capacity, he had the knowledge, he had the intelligence, he had the history, he had the political background, he knew what to do. So when he said something meaningful, people remembered it, it resonated. So he knew he ain't just here to get a check. He was the new wave of entertainment. He ain't here to just make something. He also dropped some jewels I can use. These dudes been in the entertainment in business for so long, in traditional entertainment, they forgot what they should also do. They'll get old and give away their funds and start doing it. Right now they're trying to stack and they ain't thinking about nobody else. And that's the end of the story. So this is Online Time Fame. We are JD, your host. We appreciate y'all listening. Until next time, let us just say peace.